In August 2016 I visited Bagan in Myanmar. I flew from Yangon on Yangon Airways up to Bagan, and later on I flew to Mandalay. I was surprised how clean and tidy these domestic planes were in a small country like Myanmar. I only had time to visit the new Bagan and the old Bagan. The old Bagan is where all the temples were. Old Bagan is known for its archaeological Buddhist temples built in the 10th century or thereabouts. There's about 2,000 of these temples, and here's an image of the main ones. I arrived at my hotel, Mingala, hard to pronounce, and it was a nice basic hotel with air-conditioned rooms with comfy beds in pretty much the centre of the old town. After the rain had stopped, I went for a walk around the corner to the Weather Spoon Bagan restaurant and had one of their advertised hamburger and chips, and it was rather nice. I hired an electric motorbike and went for a ride to look at some of the old temples and such, and here was one of them with some decorations in the trees and a fair amount of people, obviously tourists as well, but it was nice to begin. And I went up to the second and third stories and had a look around at the panoramic view of the lush green forests, not forest but bush and trees near Bagan, surrounding the temples. And in the distance you can't see it, but that was the sea. It's easy to say there's 2,000 temples, but it's not until you have a look at this panoramic view of all the temples surrounding this big one, and there was just so many of them that they dotted the landscape. As you can see in this video, they're everywhere. It was quite nice to stand and look, and I really enjoyed my time on this particular temple. And because it's an archaeological area, there was no admission fee to any of the temples that I visited. Here's a view of the steep stairs that you had to walk up to get to the top of the temple, and they were probably 45 degrees and not easy to cope with at my age. In one of the little villages there was this model of a number of the different temples around the area, and it was again interesting to look at this and look around at a local temple, fairly plain in its appearance and use. Here is another temple, and it was conveniently located in obviously a tourist spot where people would go and have a panoramic view of this river. Not far away in this little village was the Irrawaddy River, and it was in high flood. I stopped and had a short look at what looked like a mini soccer game in a smaller field. I tried to get the electric bike through there, and I got stuck, and the locals helped me get it out of the water. Here's an image of the front gates of the hotel after some heavy rain and flooding. Opposite the hotel were about 20 of these pagodas or stupas, or temples, Buddhist temples, thousands of years old. Some of them were open for you to look in, and others were chained up. I was was surprised that I didn't get heckled by the people selling goods, and that was common in this town. They really didn't push you. I got the local driver to drive me around because it was so wet the day before, and he showed me a number of sites, which was great. His English wasn't great, and I can't remember exactly what he said anyway. But I walked up on top of this pagoda temple and took some video of the views surrounding the temple, and also the temple obviously. The driver drove me to this wall that went right round an old temple, and there was, I believe, 4 entrances through these big walls, and he drove me in there, and I got out of the car and went and had a bit of a look at this lovely temple. And again, the hawkers around the area just left me alone, and that was good. I don't particularly like being pestered by hawkers. And here is an image of what looks like a drain or a moat, and maybe it was for gathering water, because it does rain heavily in this region in Bagan. And in the middle of this moat was this building, and I don't know the purpose of it. So I went inside the temple, and here, to my surprise, there was electric lights flashing, highlighting Buddha sitting upright, and with a lot of other decorations around it. But the big doors were interesting. They must be very old. The driver drove me to another temple, and this one had really nice paintings on the walls, and it was disappointing some 12 months later to hear that Bagan was hit by an earthquake, and a lot of the temples were destroyed, and they'll have to rebuild them, of course, for the tourist factor. But you can see some of the damage done by just wear and tear. And then I got sucked in by a hawker. This woman said, "Can you be my first sale for the day?" in broken English, and I bought a really cheap t-shirt that didn't last 10 minutes. It wore out really quickly, but it was hand painted and it was quite nice. That same woman followed me into the temple and started to explain its history, and I didn't quite understand it. One of the smaller pagodas nearby had a moat system as well, but it also had a retaining wall right around the temple, and these brick angular structures to hold the walls up and give it strength. That was quite different to the rest of the pagodas or temples. So you can see, not only did it have a retaining wall, but also there was a bit of a drainage system that I lost the video for, but around the wall there was a drainage system, and again another example of how this area was prone to flooding. If you have a look just to the right of this temple, all the things set out for sale by the hawkers outside the temples, and again they didn't annoy me at all. This bloke had little drawings, and they were reasonably cheap. As we entered one of the smaller villages, you could see a number of old pagodas in amongst all the housing as well. This was a lovely old wooden structure, and it was made of Burmese blackwood. Out of all the temples or pagodas that I visited, this was the only one from memory with lions or statues out the front of it, and that was quite unusual to me. And of course an entrance gate, and the design of this one was quite different to the others. It was more closer to the design of the big pagodas in the cities, but without the gold leaf. I caught one of these quaint little rickshaw type taxis that took me to the airport along one of the main roads, or the only main road to the airport, and it was unique in the sense that it was different. I hadn't been on a taxi like that before, and we stopped and I took a video of the welcome sign across the roadway, and then we arrived at the airport and it was time to fly out and go to Mandalay on the Yangon Airways flight. Here are a couple of Google Earth images of the earthquake that hit Myanmar in that year. And this earthquake was only a couple of weeks after I'd left Myanmar. The video was produced by myself, and it's the end of another exciting video of my short visit to Bagan, Myanmar in August 2016.